One country prints paper, and the entire world obeys. Even countries that openly oppose America find themselves playing by its financial rules. This dominance is reflected in the data. The US dollar is used in 88% of all global trade. Every other currency on the planet is fighting for a share of what remains. This creates a lopsided reality where America can print money to buy real goods, while other nations must exchange actual labor and resources to earn those same dollars. Economists call this the exorbitant privilege. How did the global economy voluntarily enter into a system that so clearly favors one side? To understand how the world became trapped by the dollar, we have to look back at the specific historical moment when the rules of money were entirely rewritten. In 1944, the global context was one of total ruin. World War II had left the economies of Europe and Asia in absolute devastation. The United States emerged as the only major power with an untouched, booming industrial economy. Representatives from 44 nations gathered at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, tasked with building a new foundation for global finance. They agreed to anchor the world to the dollar. Currencies were pegged to the US dollar, and the dollar to physical gold at $35 per ounce. America held 70% of the global gold reserves, making the dollar the absolute safest asset on Earth. By the late 1960s, that stability was failing. America was printing excess dollars to fund the Vietnam War and massive domestic programs. Foreign allies realized America was printing more paper than it held in gold. They began aggressively exchanging their dollar holdings for physical bullion. This chart shows the immediate threat to the U.S. economy. The gold vault was rapidly draining, with reserves hitting a dangerously low level. In 1971, President Nixon reacted with the Nixon shock, unilaterally ending the dollar's convertibility to gold without any warning to America's allies. Traditional economic logic suggests that removing the gold backing should have collapsed the dollar, but the currency mutated into a different kind of power. With the gold backing gone, the central mystery remains. Why did the world continue to use the dollar as its reserve currency? The answer arrived in 1974 through a secret deal brokered by U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. America offered military protection and weapons to Saudi Arabia. In exchange, the Saudis agreed to price their oil exclusively in U.S. dollars. This created a cascade effect. As other OPEC nations followed suit, every nation on Earth suddenly needed U.S. dollars because every nation needed oil to function. The dollar's value was no longer tied to gold in a vault. It was now backed by the active global necessity of energy. This strategy generated massive global demand. Because oil was required to keep the lights on, countries were forced to hold the currency used to buy it. Today, the dollar's dominance has evolved beyond oil into a system maintained by insurmountable network effects. 4 key pillars lock this system in place: deeply integrated global trade pricing, access to massive U.S. financial markets, a historic trust in U.S. debt, and an unrivaled military to protect trade routes. This trap has a crushing side effect for developing nations when the U.S. Federal Reserve decides to raise interest rates. Rate hikes pull dollars out of emerging markets and back to the U.S. This triggers capital flight and domestic financial crises in nations that rely on dollar liquidity. The cost and complexity of switching away from the dollar leaves smaller nations at the mercy of U.S. domestic economic policy. Global adversaries are pushing back. China is aggressively working to replace the dollar with the yuan in global trade. Russia and China have begun trade in non-dollar currencies, and Saudi Arabia has discussed accepting yuan for oil payments. However, most economists agree that the dollar's network effects are too deep and ingrained to unravel in the near future. The US dollar functions as the foundational operating system of the global economy, and you cannot unplug an entire infrastructure overnight.